The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society, and we will continue our conversation with Stephen Ducat today as we discuss more about Trumpism, tribalism, the current state of politics in the United States. We hope you'll join us. So really quick, before we let you go, we always talk about the future here. And Scott and I have this difference. Scott would like them to go back into the woodwork. Me, I want them out in front so I know exactly who and what they are after this all passes. And I think we've all told all of our students, in our teachings, that there's a misconception that in World War II, we defeated Nazism. And my comment to my students always is, we defeated the Germans. Nazism still exists today. So even after Trump is gone, is this something that this nation, for the rest of its existence, is going to have to live with, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I think that regardless of how much longer Trump remains on the political stage, Trumpism is going to continue. And this is not the first iteration of American fascism.
Oh, God, no.
And we know that. We know that Americans, like people around the world, are capable of following fascist leaders. And I think that one of the things that will make Americans more resilient and less likely to act on our tendency towards hating others based on their differences will be critical thinking. I think that one of the greatest contributions to the resilience of democracy will be for educational institutions from early on to train kids in how to evaluate truth claims and information, how to recognize attempts at manipulation, at attempts to mobilize hatred and bigotry, to generate grievance. There are many aspects to thinking critically, but that is going to be absolutely vital. One of the big differences between the current iteration of fascism and that in Germany, and I would call Stalinism an iteration of fascism, leaving aside the ideological cloak. In all other authoritarian regimes, there was an effort to rigidly control access to information the regime doesn't like. What is unique about this version of fascism is that through the various cult dynamics that I talk about in my book, what you have is actually a regime of self-segregation, of informational tribalism. You don't have to tell MAGA adherents not to watch MSNBC. They want to avoid it because that's information from the tribal enemy. And so you have an entire network like Fox, which is essentially a regime of confirmation bias. So, in other words, what you have is people creating a censorious regime themselves. They don't need a government keeping them from being able to get information. They avoid it. They avoid any information that in any way contradicts or challenges the tribal belief system. So, that to me is much more concerning. Like in Soviet-dominated Poland, just before the collapse of the Soviet Union, I remember there was a Polish dock worker who was sitting on a bench and interviewed by some Western reporter, and he was asked by a reporter, "How do you know what's true in the party newspaper?" And he said, well, I just read it upside down. In other words, he could be confident. He knew that he was being lied to. That whatever the party newspaper said, generally the opposite was probably true. What we need going forward, I think, as I said, is an education in critical thinking. In Texas, I think this was, it was like 20 years ago, a Democratic state legislator tried to put courses in critical thinking in the school curriculum. And that was unanimously opposed and eliminated by Republicans. They know the danger that critical thinking poses, people thinking for themselves. And they were very explicit about it. So those are my thoughts about that.
That's great. Well, but now you're going to kind of this argument between me and Scott as well. Does Trumpism survive after Trump? You're the deciding vote now. Well,
I think there are different components of Trumpism. I don't think that any of the Trump mini-me's have the kind of cult leader hold on the base that Trump has. So I think there'll be, at least at this point in time, there won't be the kind of cult of personality. I think you will have a lot of the features of the belief system and the psychology. You'll have the xenophobia, the embrace of corruption, the hatred of the political, ethnic, and religious other. So I think you will have much of the content of MAGA, but you won't have the particular personality cult. You'll have a lot of competition for that position, and it's hard to see how it will play out.
I mean, and Mark brought up, we didn't defeat Nazism, we defeated the Germans, but they've never had a Hitler since. And it's hard to come by guys who are that charismatic and have that kind of pull to people. And Trump seems unique, at least to me. I mean, I'm too young to remember Huey Long, so I'll just say that Trump is, other than, I don't know, Reagan maybe on a minor scale, Trump's hold on his people is just incredible.
Yeah, it is. And so the predispositions that Trump activated and appealed to will continue to be there. So there may not be a Trump yet, another Trump yet. But one of the things that I think is profound about what happened as part of the Marshall Plan was, the education of the German population. That they, in American culture, there is a kind of allergy to regret. We're not supposed to focus on the bad things that have happened in the past. We have to look forward. We have to think positive. We can't dwell on all these negative things. And so there's a tendency to, if not whitewash history, to just not pay much attention to it. The Germans were the exact opposite. They made central to the educational system knowledge about their fascist history. They didn't try to whitewash it. Americans are much more conflicted about that. I mean, I think, liberals have wanted slavery to be part of the historical, the history of slavery to be part of curricula, for a long time. And again, it's no surprise that conservatives want it banished. And so I think that the Germans were much more willing to engage in self-reflection than Americans tend to be willing to.
Yeah, well, that was
going to play out.
A whole program that they put together, I guess informally. I can't say the word. It's Vergangenheit, but good to. I can't say it, but it's one of those long German words.
German words.
Yeah, it's like 16 different words all put together. But they went through that process in the 50s and the 60s mostly to sort of come to grips with the fact that they had done something. We've never done that here with civil rights, with slavery, with I mean, they just yesterday was Veterans Day, and they took down. They had taken down some months ago a couple of memorials in a cemetery in Holland, a U.S. military cemetery in Holland, that memorialized Black soldiers fighting in World War II. And they couldn't even stand. I mean, that's like going really far out of your way to find something to hate and remove it. That level of hatred is stunning in its breadth, just incredible. But when you say that we can hope for critical thinking helping us through this, I'm really sad, because unfortunately I don't see a lot of critical thinking in my classes now.
No, it's not going to happen unless it becomes an explicit part of the educational curriculum.
Yeah,
and I don't see that happening at this point.
I guess there's a few people trying out there, but it's certainly no kind of movement.
Wait, you asked me what it would take, but you didn't ask me if it's likely.
Right.
Yeah, because on this podcast we try to avoid predictions, because if there is one constant of this podcast, myself and Scott in Brooklyn, we are the absolute worst at predicting anything. Every time we make a prediction, you can almost bet the ranch that the exact opposite is going to happen. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. Going forward. Scott, got anything else?
Yeah, I do have a yes. All right. So, Stephen, how do you see the situation moving forward from here? I mean, is it possible for the United States to come together? I mean, we the people to come together after something like this, or do you see the fall of democracy? I mean, as you say, I don't see Trump is going to just delightfully go back to SNAP benefits. I just don't see. The Supreme Court says, tariffs are illegal. Trump was up apparently last night, something like 2:00 in the morning, saying, national security and we can't give back the money. And of course, that makes one wonder where the money went.
Yeah.
Or if there was ever any money involved anyway.
Well,
it's just an illusion.
Well, all the extra money that we Americans have been paying in our taxes of the additional costs, where all that went.
Again, so Brooke, I'm sorry, they just because they say that they're, people are raising prices, and a contractor was just doing some work at my house, and he said that Home Depot and Lowe's preemptively raised prices before their suppliers even charged them for the tariffs that they had to pay in order to bring in things like lumber and other material that they needed. So we're being gouged also by corporations. It's not just tariffs, and a lot of the tariffs have been absorbed by businesses that are hoping to be able to hold on and willing to take a little bit less profit right now, hoping to make it up later. But I think
that absorption is. I was just going to say that the absorption of losses, I think, is another iteration of the extortion that Trump has been engaged in. Whether it's a lawsuit and making a settlement. Basically, he is demanding money in one form or another. That if a corporation is going to actually tell the truth about their costs and how tariffs have changed that, they are imperiled. They can be subject to all manner of sanction and punishment by the Trump regime. So there's an incentive, at least in the short run, to eat some of the losses.
Right. Yeah. But again, to Brooke's point, he's been claiming all kinds of wild numbers about the amount of money that we're bringing in from other countries from these tariffs. We know that that's not true, that other countries aren't paying that freight. Our importers are. But now if the Supreme Court comes and says, you're going to have to, you don't have the power to institute these tariffs, only Congress can, and he can't, and he's got to repeal the tariffs. There's a thought that he would have to pay back some of the money to the importers that paid the tariffs. I don't see that happening, but but his point is that it's like $3 trillion. How can we pay that back? But depending on his mood, it could be as much as 12 million, 25 trillion dollars that we're taking in from these other countries due to the tariffs. It's all just vaporware. I'm not sure that it even exists. Yeah.
Well, he's also claiming this is a matter of national security. Everything's a matter of national security and an emergency and this, that, and the other thing, which seems like he's panicking in the middle of the night. And that's just very odd. I don't know if that's part of his dementia or his narcissism, and he doesn't want to disclose anything. I don't know. What do you think, Stephen?
Well, I mean, that, the national security rationale is it's in every authoritarian's playbook. You present your self-interest as the national interest. One of the things I talk about in my book, Hatreds We Love, is, that, well, a lot of authoritarians wrap themselves in the flag. That's kind of a standard move. What Trump has done, and he's done this actually explicitly and literally, is wrap the flag in himself. I don't know if you remember any of those images of Trump hugging the flag.
Sure.
But essentially what he's trying to do is a standard, Louis XIV, état c'est moi, the state is me. and so my self-interest is the national interest in every case. So this is how he frames his corruption as patriotism. That's how he frames loyalty to him personally as loyalty to the country. And that permeates everything he does.
Yeah, the national
tariffs.
The national security argument that was put forth by his lawyer Sauer in the Supreme Court was one of the most ridiculous things I think I've ever heard. Justice Kagan said, "It turns out we're in emergencies all the time." Just like we're in a constant state of emergency if this is an emergency, and it's some crazy. It's just some crazy stuff. But his people love it. I mean, I know people who hear that kind of stuff and they love it.
There's a question that you book asked a few minutes ago that maybe it's worth just touching on briefly, which is whether there's any possibility of bridges being built between kind of liberal and conservative worldviews, and this, whether these tribal boundaries can be made more permeable. And this is something I take up in the last chapter of my book. This is kind of leaving aside Trump for the moment, but just looking at the base, liberal and conservative base, and is there a way for people who are reality based to communicate with people who are completely immersed in a right-wing worldview? And I talk in the book about the research on moral intuitions. Moral intuitions are kind of ways in which all issues get understood morally. Like for conservatives, it's about purity, loyalty, and sanctity. So issues that are framed in those terms can reach conservatives more. So if you talk about whatever the issue is, leaving aside the content, whether the issue is immigration or whatever, if you're trying to persuade somebody who is kind of psychologically conservative, their moral intuitions are going to, you're going to have to speak to them. These questions of purity, loyalty, and sanctity. And there are actually studies that were done where they took an imaginary or fictional liberal candidate and conservative candidate. And for conservatives, they pitched the issues, it didn't matter what the issues were, in the moral intuitions of liberals, which are more equality, fairness, care, and so on. That wasn't very effective. But the same issue, when framed metaphorically in the moral intuitions of conservatives, a liberal issue framed in terms of purity, loyalty, and sanctity, it was a lot more compelling and persuasive than framing it in a watered-down version. You know, a lot of people think, well, to reach conservatives, you got to be more centrist. But that turns out actually not to be very compelling. It's not about diluting your position. It's about framing it in the moral intuitions of the audience you're trying to reach. If that understanding can become part of the communication strategy of the pro-democracy movement, I think there's some hope of getting somewhere.
Well, we could definitely all hope so.
So, and I still have another question. What then happens with this shutdown? It has to go to the House, and there's no guarantee, of course, that Johnson's going to do anything, that anybody's going to do anything.
Well, Johnson will do what Trump tells him to do.
Right, which means nothing's going to happen.
Well, I don't know. It depends what Trump decides is in his self-interest. He may decide, and I don't know, if he decides that ending the shutdown is going to be in his self-interest, then that's what will happen. And it's hard to know at this point what his calculation will be. But we know how he will be doing that calculation. He will be thinking, what's good for me and my people? And that's what he'll do.
If you had to guess?
My guess is my crystal ball's in the shop. So
we have to tell Brooklyn that a lot.
I think he will tell the House to end the shutdown. There will be, the budget he wants will be adopted. Democrats will get nothing. And then there's going to be this imaginary date in which, the Senate will allow a vote on the ACA subsidies. They'll lose that vote. And then it will be a battle between the lies of the Republicans and the arguments of Democrats about, okay, well, your healthcare premiums have just tripled, and they are now Trump's responsibility. I do think that may work against Trump. That allowing Trump to actually end healthcare subsidies will do damage to Trump and the Republicans. So,
and SNAP?
That's my prediction, such as it is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
SNAP. I think Trump will insist on the Supreme Court declaring that he has the right to do whatever he wants, including ending SNAP benefits, because that's what the MAGA justices have shown in the past. I think he may reverse it. I think more than ending SNAP, I think what matters to him is proving that he can do it, proving that he has all the power, that nobody can contradict him, nobody can act against him. He's got impunity and omnipotence. And if he can get the Supreme Court to affirm that, he may say, okay, well, okay, I'll restore SNAP now. I'll restore it maybe halfway now. I don't know what he's going to decide, but I don't think it's really about SNAP. It's about his own power to end it if he feels like it.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Well, this has been extremely informative. And
thank you.
We definitely appreciate you coming on. Again, this is going to give us a lot to think about. but sometimes it's always a good thing to get a different perspective from a different field of academic study into the conversation. So, Stephen, we really do appreciate you. I'm going to take the link to your books, and I do believe you were talking about the book that you're writing. It still isn't out yet, correct?
Oh no, my book came out. The
okay.
We love.
All right. Well, no, I will put a link to that and all the others that come off your website. We do have your website listed, and we definitely appreciate you coming on.
The book, just to be clear, the book came out in June. It came out before the election.
Oh, okay.
And since then, I created this Substack called Minding Politics, which has addressed some of the same themes, but as they have arisen, in a more current way. So it's kind of a hot takes on issues of the moment. So I will send you a link to my Substack.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And I also don't understand how women, like Scott says, like Elise Stefanik and I mean other women, how, I guess it's a political, but how I don't understand how women can support that or J.D. Vance's wife.
Well, you should. Well, in my book, the one I wrote recently, the earlier one is, I was actually on men's fear of the feminine and how it gets played out in politics. And in my current book, Hatreds We Love, I kind of update that analysis in a chapter called The Brittle Manhood of MAGA Males. But I also talk about MAGA females in the context of that chapter. So, maybe we can talk about that next time if
absolutely
you're interested.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, again,
definitely.
Next time.
Thank you so much for your time.
It's lots of fun. And we'll talk again soon.
Take care.
Yes, thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that's all the time we have for today's episode. We'd like to thank Dr. Stephen Ducat for being our guest and giving us a very informative program. Keep in mind, Dr. Ducat will be back this month on November 26th to record another session. So if anyone has some questions they'd like to ask Dr. Ducat directly, please send us that email to nova.society.podcast@gmail.com, and we will make sure that Dr. Ducat gets to answer those important questions. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you again next time. The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis. The JCIS is a publication of NovaWorks, a scholarly depository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description.